Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today I have a wonderful author on who is just going to help you take everything to the next level. And one thing I have learned about being an entrepreneur is scaling up your business is not easy if you don't know what you're doing. And so I've got Jan Cavelle on today. She's a semi-retired entrepreneur from the UK with a scary nearly 40 years of experience of starting and scaling micro and small businesses. And you know what? Like all entrepreneurs, she's known success and failure. She's now the writer and author of Scale for Success. And I think that's going to be coming out soon, isn't it?
It is. It is, Kim. Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction. And yes, it comes out in the UK on the 4th of February, so only a few weeks' time. A little bit later, obviously, in the States and Canada and Australia, where it's also being published, but not long to go at all. Very exciting.
Now, is this going on Amazon?
It is. It's available for pre-order on Amazon now. Yeah.
Awesome. So if it's available, it's probably available on all of the Amazons for pre-order.
I would think so. I have to say I should have checked .com, shouldn't I? But
So the thing is, we're now recording this in January. I think I'm actually going to try and have this released close to February 4th. So
wonderful,
if you're listening to this, I want you to go to your Amazon and check out Scale for Success. Now, I want you guys to get a chance to know Jan a bit. So I'm going to let her share her story, and then she's going to power into some wonderful, amazing tips for you to help you know how to scale up your business successfully.
Thank you. As part of the introduction, I have started a lot of businesses, well, a fair amount of businesses as either a sole trader or a micro trader. And then there was one in particular that I started that I needed to scale because I was a single mom and I needed to provide for my children. So I had to do much more seriously. And to really everybody's surprise, including mine, because I wasn't very knowledgeable or experienced, I did manage to grow it, and it got up to the multi-million mark of turnover, which was exciting. But there comes a point with turnover that you've grown to a certain amount, and your whole business changes. And it shifts from being just a lovely small group of you all working together, everybody knowing what's going on, everybody on the same page, to a very, very different animal, to one where you have a lot more people, you need a lot more structure, and you're much more detached from it on a daily basis, or you need to be, actually, should I say, not necessarily are. And it's a really hard period of growth. It happens somewhere between 1 and 2 million, I think, depending on sector. But the whole business just morphs into something entirely different. And I got up to the sort of couple of million mark, and I got stuck there and sort of bounced there, a little bit up, a little bit down for far too many years, and absolutely burnt myself out doing it. And I could not shift it. So I started my first step was to think I'd better find out a bit more about business. So I went on some serious training courses and tried to apply them. But actually, it was like, I always describe it, if you're building a business, it's a bit like building a house. And if you've got rotten foundations, the damn thing's never going to scale. No, and of course, I didn't have suitable foundations to scale, and I'd gone up without them. And gradually, I began to understand that it was never going to happen. But it did take me far too many years and a lot of tears and stupidity. So that's my story. And after I decided enough was enough, I thought, well, yeah, my goodness, if nothing else, I've nearly made every mistake going,
Mhm.
and certainly learned an awful lot. Maybe I can actually use all that to far better use than I was able to, but to put it together and to write for other entrepreneurs about what I'd learned and to help them avoid the mistakes that I made and some others that I could see you could make along the way.
And I think, like you talked about hitting that bigger scale of 1 to 2 million, but I think even in the beginning of your business, there's times when you need to upscale. Like, I think when you're hitting that first 50, 60,000, when you're hitting that first 100, 150,000, that 250,000, that 500,000, right? Like, I think those are kind of points when you have to really look at your business and scale. When you're hitting that 50, 60, 70,000, you're really at a point you can no longer do everything by yourself. You have to have that team around you. And it might even be, a team of 5 to 10 people, because there's just so many moving pieces. Like, you might need a graphic designer, you might need, help with social media, you might need help with accounting, right? So I think even at smaller levels, there's times when you need to know how to scale up. And when is it time to start changing it?
Spot on, Kim. I think you're absolutely right. You are talking about an animal that moves and grows on you in, as a business does grow, but actually changes, the leopard changes its spots as you grow. Um, so yeah, you're right. There are lots of things which you see as early as well as early. I think actually for 1 to 100,000 is such a hard thing to do in its first place. So yeah, you can see lots of those things coming into play right as early as that.
I know you've got some hints and tips that you're going to share today, but if you're not going to cover these in the tips, one thing that you talked about that really caught my attention was laying that strong foundation. So, if those tips are about that, great. But if not, can you also talk about, how do you lay that foundation? Because most of the people listening to this are in that foundation stage right now. They're starting their business, they're building that foundation, and you're better off to build it right the first time.
Absolutely. If only I had. So yeah, this is what it's all about. It's stopping people making the mistakes I did. I think there's a lot of tips I'd love to pass on. How long have we got? But yeah, let's try and pick out the biggest ones. I think the structures are very important of your business. And by that, I'm talking structures of people, firstly,
Mm.
because if you're going up to a certain stage, you want to have a plan in mind. Are you going to get a lot bigger? Say, sort of 10 people, 12 people, particularly above about 12 people, you're going to need other people managing them other than you. And the earlier you get them in many ways for better, or at least you need to be clear in your own mind whether the people you're surrounding yourself with in the early days are actually wanting to grow with you.
Mm.
Because otherwise, you're going to have to bring other people over their heads, which is always a really tricky thing to do. Because, Joe and Sheila, who've been there since day one, tend to be very resentful about somebody coming in at a much bigger salary, knowing nothing about the business, which in some ways you can understand. But on the other hand, if Joe and Sheila didn't want to grow and you did, you're left with two choices: giving up your dream or bringing in new people who are wanting to grow and therefore able to grow, because however much you talk them into it, if they don't want to grow, and they don't want the business to grow, they're not going to grow personally, and they're not going to be committed to doing it.
You
And
know,
that
there
can
was
really sabotage things.
Yeah, and there was one thing I remember us talking about in the pre-interview for this. And you talked about the fact that just because someone's been with you a long time doesn't mean that they're ready to take on a leadership role.
Absolutely right. No, not at all. Because, they may be very skilled at doing, just trying to pull a sample business, for sales, for example. which is fine, and they are content to do that, but they've no wish or a bit perhaps ability to run a sales force. They can't. So running a sales team is very, very different from being a salesperson. And that's a very good example, actually, which I've fallen into by chance, but goodness knows I'm grateful for that, because you can see that you've got this differential between a salesperson and a leader. And that becomes a problem because, as I say, do you say to your salesperson who's been there since the age of dot and has produced really good figures solidly for you, sorry, you're not the senior one here. You're going to be a junior now. It's a very tricky situation, and you really, really need to have a plan in your head how you're going to cope with that. Be it by getting people who want to grow in with you in the beginning, which is ideal in some ways, but or just be clear to other people that in time you're going to grow, and that's fine if they don't want to, and they'll always have a job if they do it well. However, that will mean that they are not going to be the senior in due course.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with respect,
Yeah.
Having that vision, communicating that vision to the people on your team so that they know what's coming next. So it's not a big, all of a sudden you're just slapping them in the face with this. And I think too, it's having those conversations with those people and finding out what their expectations are. Do they want to grow? Do they want to take on more responsibility? Do they want to become a manager? Because if you know this, then, maybe there are things you can put in place. Maybe you see managerial potential. They're not quite ready for it yet, but maybe while they're still working and while you're still growing, they could be taking a course.
Exactly.
To get ready.
Yeah, if they want to, then that's never a problem. It's only when they don't want to that you've got a real issue on your hands.
But I think if you're communicating from the start and you're letting people know where the business at and what the next steps are, and that they're valuable, I think a lot of those things can kind of be, I don't think it can totally be taken care of, but I think you can lessen the degree of it, with good, strong communication and respect and relationship.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it was something that came out very clearly. Going back to the book, I spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs from the book, and there's an entrepreneur who I talked to and used examples of his work in the chapter on leadership, and he did exactly that. To totally agree with you. And I mean, he managed to sell his business for an awful lot of money in the end. It was a multi-global business. But he had his team on board from the start. He was absolutely straight with all the senior members that his intention was to build it and grow it. And I think I'm right in saying he made about five or six of his team millionaires in the process. And he says to this day, it's one of the things he's proudest of. Which is just lovely, and he did it by being continually, completely open with his team.
I had an opportunity to work with Michael Tracy, who's Brian Tracy's
Wow.
son.
Yeah.
And one of the things I remember him saying, and he used an acronym, and I wish I could remember it, but this little piece has just stuck with me, is the fact is you should be designing your business to kick yourself out of it.
Yes. It's the same as, oh goodness, I'm going to go blank as well. Michael, can't get it. Michael Gerber, work on the business, not in the business. Same sort of principle. And there does come a time when you're going to have to work on it, not in it. And other people are going to have to be the ones that are working in it for you. And that's, if you want to grow, that's always where you're going to have to be heading.
Yeah, well, because there's so many things in the beginning that we do that are working in our business to make sure that everything goes. But you can't grow your business if you're doing everything in the business. And I know for me, 2020, one of the big focuses was, building those systems, building those things, bringing on, the right people, so that in 2021, my focus would be working on the business. Not that
Yeah.
I stopped working on the business, because I did, but I was doing both. I was working in and on, and it was causing, a tremendous amount of stress. And I need to be working on the business and be
Mm.
able to trust my team to take care of the business. Now, it doesn't mean I don't oversee things, because I have a manager that manages all the book projects, right? Because I can't do that anymore. I
No.
can't be writing and editing, managing all the projects, and trying to grow the business. It just don't work. Plus, for 2 years now, I've been trying to write my own book. I'm like the shoemaker whose kids have no shoes, right? Like, here I
Yeah.
am, a book publisher. Okay, it's not that I'm not an author. Okay, I've authored quite a few books, but I've been working on my signature book, the book that I'm going to use to build the business. And I had
Yes.
2 years now. So it's like, no, this has got to be done.
Yeah, it's a story I hear from other entrepreneurs, that they do get stuck and don't do it, and good on you that you've achieved it.
And so, I'm really excited because I think this year is just going to be a tremendous year of growth.
That's
Now, did
fabulous.
did you have any other tips for us? Because we're going to talk about your book quickly, but I know you came prepared with a few other things as well.
I did, yeah. I mean, oddly enough, you mentioned systems just now, and systemizing everything is a very important part of being able to let go.
Mhm.
And again, if you can do it early on, or better still, get somebody, if you've got somebody already on a small team who loves doing the systems, because the chances are you don't, because most entrepreneurs hate systems. Let's be honest about it. We don't like small print. We're big picture people. And so systems bore us to pieces. But, if you can get those systems done right, then other people, and documented right, then other people can do all these things. And it's much, much easier for you to get out of the business. It's much easier if, one of your key staff has a major personal crisis and disappears on you, for you not to have to get hauled back in to replace them. It makes for seamless handovers, and it's the only way to grow is to have really good sound systems. So that's another important point.
And you brought out a really good point there. I think we want to highlight a bit. Just because you're working on your business instead of in your business doesn't mean that negates you knowing how to do everything in your business. I mean, there comes a time, I'm talking about, when you're under like that 500,000 mark,
Yeah.
like there comes a times when you can't know everything. But, in the beginning, you do have to know how to do everything, because you are going to lose staff.
Mm.
Something's going to happen. Some sort of sickness, catastrophe, whatever takes place, right? Like, these things
Yeah.
happen. So, when you talk about having those systems in place, I think it's really important as an entrepreneur that that you work with the people to create the systems,
Definitely.
that you don't just leave it up to them, that you know the systems yourself. Now, maybe you aren't running the systems, but you know about them, you helped create them.
Yeah.
And so, and you make sure that everything is in a central place. So, not everything
Yes.
is sitting on somebody else's computer. It's either got to be on your computer, or, it's got to be up in the cloud somewhere,
Yeah.
where you can access it when you need it. Because if, like, take 2019, for example, one of my main people had some extreme circumstances, totally, completely beyond her control.
Mm.
Okay, like, these things just happened out of the
Yeah,
blue,
they do. They happen to all of us.
and it took her out for almost a year,
Mm.
at least a good 6 months, right? And so I had to step in,
Yeah.
but I could do it because I helped her create all the systems.
Yes. But ideally, you want to step in for a shorter time as possible as well.
Yes.
And so again, the systems will help you. I mean, A, it means you can do it, and B, it also means you can train somebody else up to do it, or get some of it done by a temp, or all those things. It just completely de-risks your business. And
Yeah.
of course, the more you grow, the greater risk financially and everything else your business is under. So
Yes.
it's, actually looking at the risks involved of your business suddenly becomes a much more important part of it. When there's just you can sort of shrug your shoulders and shut up shop, or give it another try or whatever. When you've created this independent body of a business involving other people, you've got to look and think, what risks can I get rid of? Obviously, some, you're not going to be able to. I mean, none of us expected this pandemic, but, there are a lot of risks, and systems, just as a very sensible one, takes a lot of risk internally out of a business.
I want to talk about your book, Scale for Success. So here's a question I tend to ask most of my guests who are authors. Tell me about the good, the bad, and the ugly of getting this book written and published.
Oh, wow. Well, firstly, I mean, I think that one of the ugly ones was terrible self-doubt at the beginning, because I kept on thinking, I want to write this, but really, am I going to have any credibility? Because I didn't actually succeed in doing it. But, and I kept on thinking, but, actually, I don't care that people know that. And actually, are we not more comfortable hearing about people who say, I've messed up, to learn from in some ways, than somebody who pretends to be some absolute paragon and, you feel completely overwhelmed with? But I did decide that I did need a lot of expert help to provide the answers. I knew, as I say, by that time, an awful lot, but not enough. And so where the idea came from, I've no idea. But these things, as you know, as an author, all come together and start making us think. So I thought, well, I'll ask friends who are entrepreneurs to contribute, and that's initially how it spun. And so I started writing and started chatting to friends and putting this idea together that, we could look at all the different areas of business and offer specific help from people who have very relevant experience in them. And then quite a few months in, I thought, is this going to sit in a drawer? What on earth am I going to do with it? Because I knew, how hard it was to get a publishing deal, or so everybody told me. And at that stage, I thought, well, I'd love to do that, because it's a childhood dream. I could always self-publish another time, but a bit of me thought, it's a bucket list job, get one book properly published. But I'll never do it. So back and forth I went, and eventually it was Christmas last year. And I thought, well, I'll bung. I think I sent 2 or 3 submissions off. That was it. And I thought, well, I won't hear, and so then I'll have to look at self-publishing, or I'll have to give it up. I can't do this. I don't have authority to do this. And lo and behold, in between Christmas and New Year, I got a call from Bloomsbury straight away, saying, would you like to come in for an interview? And it was so much a dream. Honestly, I didn't dare tell anybody else. I sneaked into London, because I don't live in London, all on my own, without anybody knowing where I was. Went to this meeting and thought, this is dream time. I don't know what's going on, and a few negotiations and what have you, and rejuggling the idea. There was a contract with Bloomsbury, and I still part of me doesn't think that's real. A year later, crazy, but it's true. So yeah, really mind-blowingly exciting, because it meant an awful lot to me, to have that contract, to have that vindication, I suppose, as a writer or whatever.
That is
But
so
Bloomsbury did
awesome.
say to me, you're going to have to stretch outside your few friends, good though they are, and I do know some great people, but we want to take this global, because they produce books globally, obviously, themselves. And therefore, you're going to have to involve entrepreneurs from the States and from Australia as well. Which made it a much bigger task. And there was little me, who nobody had really heard of, and I was trying to sort of say, to exciting people, please, will you give me your time? So it turned into a bit of a sales job for a while. So yeah, there were a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of, can I do it? Am I good enough?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. We all have that, am I good enough? Am I
Mm,
worthy enough? Do I know enough? Right? And the way I look at it is, as long as you know more than the person reading your book, you don't need to know everything.
yeah,
You just need to know more than.
yeah.
So,
Well, I knew I had a lot of years of experience, that's for sure. And as I say, as luck would have it, I've managed to assemble a cast of some really amazing entrepreneurs, who've been so generous with their time and advice.
that is so cool. So Jen, how can people get a hold of you if they want to find out more about you, about your book?
Well, my own website is www, curiously enough, jancavelle.co.uk. So that's JANCAVELLE.co.uk. And they can just type Jan Cavelle Scale for Success, and that will bring up a book in places like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and all the usual suspects. Or they can go to Bloomsbury's own website too.
Well, that is so wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jan, for being on the show.
Kim,
You've
my
been
pleasure.
So this has been Jan Cavelle and Kim Thompson Pinder on the Author to Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.